All right, good morning, Doug. We're back with questions from members of the file. First off, do you use any mainstream sentiment as a contrarian indicator? If so, what do you look for? Is it like consensus across mainstream media, like a Time magazine cover or the shoeshine boy or anything like that?
Well, I like the idea of doing that, and I actually used to do that. Certainly, when drugstores used to have magazine racks, and you could just go through one magazine cover after another and see what was on people's minds or what the editors thought were on people's minds. And it was a good indication because people will buy a magazine on something that interests them. So, what are they interested in? I guess that's been substituted by online searches. And anyway, slime and newspeak no longer exist really as magazines. They're just online. I don't know if they even sell copies of them, hard copies of them anymore, or any kind of magazine. So that's out. And frankly, it's not like I wander the streets, the highways and the byways asking people what they think about things. So, no, I'm afraid that I've become a little bit cut off and living in my silo. I don't go to an office workplace every day where you might bump into 10 or 20 people and get into random conversations with them. So, am I cut off from what's happening now in the US or, for that matter, Uruguay or Argentina? I wonder. What do you think, Matt?
I think it is harder now to tap into the mainstream and see what the zeitgeist is around investments, especially. I think it's yeah, you're not having the magazine cover metaphor is a problem. But for me, the best one I've had, honestly, is when people in my family ask me about particular investments. Like they don't mention it anything very often. Very rarely do they ask about something. But when they do, it's usually at the height of something. So yeah, like my during the first bout that with meme stocks, my nephew, who I think at the time was 15, texted me and said, should I buy GameStop? And I'm pretty sure that was within days of the top. I mean, it might have been the day, could have been the day before, but it was right there. So that was helpful.
It's one reason why I miss playing polo because both in Palm Beach and Aspen, where I played, I would go to the polo parties that people would have, and you'd talk to these guys, generally pretty well-to-do guys, and just all kinds of hangers on. And this type of thing would always come up, but I don't play polo anymore, so I don't know what they're talking about. It used to be very helpful, but I'm not involved in a group like that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, think about some of the calls you have with these, you're on a call with a bunch of finance pros, but they are very sophisticated and of like mind to you. So that's not really, you don't really get out of your silo by talking to them, even though you get lots of great information from them.
That's absolutely correct. This one Zoom call I'm on is with generally about 30, mostly financial pros, but a few outliers in other occupations, often with military backgrounds. And the reason we're all on the Zoom call together is we all kind of see the world the same way. So it's not very helpful. It's reinforcing.
Yeah, it is good to get that it is good to get the outside take. I remember even before the financial crisis during the housing boom, I remember being at a um somewhere in Europe and I was in the pool and there was a couple talking about buying their third investment property. This was in the real estate bull market then in like 2006. Um, and they were just talking about flipping deals and making money. And I was just like, they're just random people I'd run into there. And I thought this seems like this is kind of crazy if this is everyone's talking about getting rich on this thing. So you got to
Well,
mix with the public.
I'd like people that are out in the world to let us know what they see and hear. I'd like
Yeah,
some, I'd like some boots on the ground data, and I'm not getting enough of it where I am just at the moment.
yeah. So if you see interesting observations on the world that you think might be helpful in helping us understand what the zeitgeist is, what people are really thinking, then put it in the comments because we read them. Okay. All right.
Most
So the next question is, at one point on a podcast months ago, Doug said, if you drop me anywhere in the world, I'd be on top in 6 to 12 months. Says something to that effect, he said. So what would be another statement similar to this one that if you could scroll through your memory for us average Americans? Is there another?
I'm not sure how to interpret that exactly.
I wonder if you,
I think what I was trying to say, frankly, was that here you are. You're on a planet with 8 billion other people, and in order to survive, you have to figure out what goods or services you can provide to as many of those people as you can in order to get what you want. So I've always had a tendency to think entrepreneurially. What can I offer to this person that I can get what I'd like in return? So it's basically that way of thinking. And it's why, from that point of view, I've always liked to put myself into strange and exotic foreign climes. Because if you stay in the town or city or state or country where you're born, you're basically on a level playing field and you have no innate marginal advantage over the thousands or millions of other people in that pool with you. So go someplace where you're likely to be different and can bring something unusual and valuable to the party. That's what I was saying, basically. I don't know if that answers the question or not.
yeah, I think it makes sense. Okay, next question is, what is the over under on the military interdicting the US government? He says, that is to say, arresting many government employees, i.e., Congress, etc. I will ask again in a few months to see if your opinion has changed at all. He says, I mean this question totally seriously.
Yeah. So the question is, what's the nature of today's military? And of course, for decades now, we've had a volunteer military as opposed to a draft military. Um, would a bunch of draftees be more or less likely to engage in a coup? And I would say less likely because they're anxious to get out of the military as soon as they can. Whereas most of the people that are in the military today joined voluntarily, and a lot of them want to make a career out of it. And when you've had military coups in the past, and what would be the most recent serious one? Well, one of the most famous one, of course, was what happened with the French in Algeria in the 50s and 60s. And those are all professional soldiers. And they think it's the same. They have the same interests. And so I I think, but I don't really know, that the military has become rather soft and degraded in the US, despite the fact that there are huge numbers of special ops soldiers now, which there didn't used to be. Uh, and special ops type guys tend to be wild hares and more adventurous towards that type of thing. But at the same time, they're having drag shows and things like this on, well, especially Air Force bases. But you have an opinion on that one, Matt?
Well, I will say that I do know that they drummed a lot of people out of the military that maybe you could argue are of more patriotic sensibilities, but with Obama first, lots of effort around that. And then with COVID, a whole bunch got kicked out or opted out because they wouldn't get vaccinated. In fact, I just saw something yesterday that said that the Navy was allowing sailors and SEALs that had been drummed out because of not wanting to be vaccinated, allowing them to come back and guaranteeing them that they wouldn't be uh, judged harshly for 3 years at promotion hearings. So they're trying to bring SEALs back in now that they kicked out basically before because of COVID. But my point is, I think the military today is not maybe as patriotic of an institution as it has been in the past. And so the idea of them, I think he's getting at the idea that they would interdict into the government, run a coup essentially because of all the stuff we see happening, in the last few weeks. It just seems pretty unlikely in my mind. I think they're kind of on the gravy train.
Yeah, I don't think they have the solidarity that they used to, where it was all uh, young or middle-aged, testosterone-driven males from a certain background. Now they have this idea, which, well, this woman Cheadle at the Secret Service was promoting called 30-30, which is 30% diversity hires or whatever you want to call them. I guess that's not considered politically correct to call them diversity hires anymore. There must be a PC word for those people. Anyway, 30-30, 30% of the workforce by 2030. And when people are diverse like that, they can't get together and compare notes and share values about what they'd like to do to change things. So it's more likely that it's been in the past because it's a volunteer army, but it's less likely because it's become degraded in recent years. It's not an answer. Can't be sure.
Hmm. Yeah, especially at the senior officer level, right? Because a lot of those people, that's very political at that level, and people get drummed out if they aren't part of the program, right? You'd have to be, I think a senior officer would have to be involved in that. It wouldn't be done by a bunch of privates.
No, and I think once people become generals in today's military, they're basically political hacks as opposed to professional soldiers, really. I mean, you don't find a lot of Pattons and Eisenhowers and things like that. They're people that who knows how they got where they are. They're time servers. So I don't know. Don't count on the military to save your bacon if you're afraid the US is going to collapse. That's my guess.
Yeah. Okay. Hypothetical scenario.
Besides, I've got to say, everybody in the military, they all have, or a lot of them have, car payments to make, student loan payments to make, some of them, uh, mortgage payments to make, credit card debt. They don't want to lose their jobs. So they'll pretty much do what they're told so they don't get cashiered.
Right. Exactly. All right. So, hypothetical scenario: the Democrats nominate Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, for their candidate. What's your gut reaction to him?
I think it'd be a smart move on the Democrats' part. Those of you who have read our series, Speculator, Drug Lord, and Assassin, in Assassin, which is about, well, it's about political assassinations and somebody running for the presidency, we have a character called the Crane, who is eerily similar to Dwayne Johnson's Rock. And the reason that John Hunt and I put him in there is because we felt that somebody like Dwayne Johnson would be embraced by the American voter rate. I mean, good looking, athletic, well spoken, well known. That's very important. Name recognition is critical today. No really radical political opinions, kind of an everyman. So I think that although I understand that Dwayne Johnson has, like almost everybody, more or less center-left opinions, yeah, it'd be a smart move from the point of view of the Democrats.
Yeah. Certainly more popular than Kamala would be, I think. But
Well, Yeah. And even though the odds have gone further against us, I thought it was a good deal when I first heard, you'll recall, that you could get 8-1. And then we put some money down at 12-1 that Kamala was not going to be the Democratic nominee. And now the odds have gone further. And they're, what is it, 20-1? You can
Yeah, I
get.
think a little over that. Yeah.
Uh, Makes me feel like doubling down, but
I know. I was tempted to do it last night. I almost did.
I know. Seems like a gift. I can't see how the Democrats. I mean, she is just such a totally undesirable, indeed objectionable candidate from every point of view. Uh, Her low intelligence, her complete lack of a knowledge base, her lack of charm.
And her track record. I mean, her track record is just so condemning. I mean, all of the things that she's done in every role that she's had has been, if you notice what she's doing, it's not good.
It's not. She's an ultra leftist. She's super woke. So
Super woke, but then at the same time, the whole thing about like the way she handled the inmates who were scheduled for release, but she kept in prison so that she could use them to work as indentured servants for the state. I mean,
that's so shameful. It's actually criminal. In fact, I'm sure it is criminal. Somebody should prosecute her for having done that, among many other things. So, is the Democratic Party so degraded? Well, the answer is yes, it is, that it will actually nominate her and run her. But that's like signing their death warrant. Or if she wins, it's like a death warrant for the US. No, I still think we're on the right side of that action. I do feel like doubling down and taking more of the action at 20-1. It's like a gimme.
if she is the one that comes out of this, though, I think it shows how powerful the media machine is at shaping public opinion, and that you can no longer at all trust people to make anything close to a rational decision on their own because they just eat whatever shit is fed them.
Yeah, it's like the media can be defined as that group of talking heads, which constitute 5 or 10% of the population, that are trying to make the other 90 or 95% of the population think that they all think what they think. And, and of course, this is what we were talking about earlier, not having enough boots on the ground contact with real ordinary people and having conversations with them. And all we hear is what the talking heads say everybody believes and thinks.
Well, I will say I had a conversation with a woman who's about your age today, who specifically mentioned to me how excited she was about Kamala running for president.
Jesus.
I know. I couldn't believe it. And she was
Well,
enthusiastic. She goes, "Oh, with everything's so bad, but at least we have this is some good news."
yeah. Well, I guess that's what we call the you'll find out department.
Yeah. And she's not even on TikTok. So she's not even getting her mind shaped by the algorithm.
Yeah, and she's not a recent uh, college graduate where she's been subjected to 4 years of intense programming. Oh, it's kind of scary. I mean, it's not that, and of course, as we were talking about beforehand, it's that if we say anything that is not totally supportive of Trump, we're going to have a lot of people that are going to say, "Are you guys communists? Are you anti-American, or whatnot?"
Traitors, traitors,
Traitors,
Brad.
right?
Yeah.
But I hasten to add that even though the Donald has no philosophical or even psychological, he at least he's a cultural conservative. He does not want to overturn the nature of the U.S. So under the circumstances, even with all his really bad economic ideas, yes, I don't want to get into all that now. That's reason enough to vote for him. At least he's a cultural conservative. He's not a Jacobin like all the Democrats are.
Right. Yep. Yeah, we discussed potentially starting to use a trigger warning at the beginning of our videos, not because we're worried about injuring the minds of the snowflakes, but concerned that we were injuring the minds of conservatives. So,
Yeah, this meme that the baby Bush started of either you're with us or against us seems to have taken root, uh, where if you're not a rabid Trump supporter, you must be one of the enemy.
it's pretty shocking. This doesn't end well
No, it
when you
doesn't.
divide people like this.
If it works out to a civil war, I mean, I don't think either side's going to give much quarter to the other.
No, no chance. All right, Doug. They say that you should never meet your heroes. Have you met any heroes that have failed to live up to expectations? Also, which ones might have lived up to expectations?
Well, people that I admire and I consider to be have been heroic in one way or another. Um, who anybody is not well. I can't think of anybody, frankly, that's really disappointed me, frankly, that I've met that I thought I'd like, and it turned out I didn't like. At least I can't think of them right now. I can think of a couple guys that I was pretty sure that I would like them, and by God, we got along like a house on fire. And those were Harry Brown. I started out reading all of his books, and then later I met Harry, and he was just like you expected him to be from his books. And we became very good friends. And I really enjoyed his company. And so he met my expectations. And another was David Hackworth.
Hmm.
When I had when I had when strategic investing was on the New York Times bestseller list, was published by Simon and Schuster. The editor, he was the editor in chief of Simon and Schuster at that time. Uh, they were publishing all these books. So here, read this. You're going to like it. It was one of their authors, and it was David Hackworth. And the book was called About Face. Ah, yes, exactly.
Great
And
book.
where Hackworth talks about his life in the military, starting out when he joined, I think he got into the army somehow when he was age 16, just after World War II. I think, as I recall, that was the case. And then he went through Korea and Vietnam and all this type of thing. And it's a hell of a good read. And Hackworth and I got along very well. And because another friend of mine, Peter Lund, who used to publish Paladin Press, used to be a partner with Bob Brown at Soldier of Fortune magazine. Um, Peter used to come to the Era Society, which I ran every year for most of 30 years. Uh, and he'd bring along one of these people that he was connected with, mostly military guys, almost all. And uh, he brought Hackworth along with him one time, and we just got along great. Stayed in touch until Hack kicked the bucket.
Hmm.
So, answer the question. No, I've had pretty good luck uh, meeting people I thought I'd like, and it turned out I did. And there are other examples too. And of course, I
Yeah.
read some authors, and I'm sure I wouldn't like them. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. Who was that guy that was on our podcast together that wrote that book,
That economic hitman.
Economic Hitman? Right. A few interesting ideas, definitely some interesting experiences, but we didn't get along. I thought he was an objectionable guy.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was
I
surprised.
didn't think he was a hero before that. I just thought he was a guy
No.
that had some interesting experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. He was very concerned about global warming, if I recall.
And I'm sure he was concerned about COVID, and I was sure about being politically correct, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah. He was a disappointment, but he wasn't a hero. But we did like his book the first time. Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was a good insight to how utterly corrupt the system is.
Yep. Okay, next question is, what are your thoughts on the what he calls the Kool-Aid countries, which I never heard that expression before. He's talking about Guyana and Suriname, those. So what is Kool-Aid countries? What does that expression come from?
Must be referring to that escapade with Jim Jones and the
Oh, yeah, yeah,
church in
yeah.
the jungle where like 1,000 people committed suicide or were murdered, mostly by drinking Kool-Aid with some type of poison in it. I'm not sure what it was.
Right, that's right.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I've spent a lot of time in Suriname, as it turns out. Been there a couple of times and had really some exotic adventures in Suriname, um, and got to know the military dictator reasonably well. The whole thing, the whole story, I think is a hell of a story. I'm not going to bore people with it now. And been to Guyana a couple of times. Uh, yeah, like one time we spent 3 or 4 days out in a mining camp in the middle of the jungle, in the middle of nowhere. And there's not really not much to recommend Guyana, although now it's got this giant oil deposit that is on their ground, or is it? Because the Venezuelans say, no, it's on our ground. And they're threatening to conquer 2/3 of the country to steal more oil, which they don't know what to do with the oil they already have in Venezuela. They can't produce it. And then the third of the three is French Guiana. And I'd say that's probably the least interesting of the three. I wanted to go to Devil's Island when I was there. And I've been there just once or twice. I forget. At least once, though. But it was just too hard to get to Devil's Island. And anyway, French Guiana is actually a department of Paris. It's part of France, technically speaking. And it's not like a colony or anything like that. And it's basically a giant French military base. And
Hmm.
it's very expensive. Costs are all pretty much higher than they are in metropolitan France. And I went to Kourou, the rocket base, rented a car and drove there. It's just a giant military camp with French soldiers and legionnaires all over the place. So interesting. I don't know. Nobody goes there. It's nice to have been there. Nobody goes to any of those three countries, quite frankly. They're all jungle except for a narrow strip along the Caribbean where
Hmm.
everybody lives, all three of them.
Hmm. All right. Next question. I know Doug isn't a fan of T-bills, but does he like preferred stocks or junk bonds for income generation?
Yes, I do, but they're hard to find today. But I'm not interested in bonds unless they're convertible bonds in companies that I really am interested in. So, a relatively rare thing is a convertible bond on a mining company that I like their prospects, and I own a couple of them. But and preferred stocks, well, it would have to be a convertible preferred stock, which gives you some upside potential. But those are generally really small issues, and institutions can't really buy them because the markets today are basically run by these giant institutions like Vanguard and BlackRock, and
Hmm.
they can't buy these teeny weeny little less than a rounding error type issues. So there's not a lot of them around. But when I can find them, I'll buy them. And if I find anything out there that I can buy, I'll tell our file members about it, obviously.
Hmm. When was the last time you found one of these, either a convertible bond in a mining company that you liked?
Well, let me see. Wasn't actually too long ago, but there wasn't much available. A company called West Red Lake, which
Hmm.
is an underground gold mine in on the edge of production, well supported in Canada. And I think I got like 6 or 7% coupon on the bond. And conversion at, and all these gold stocks are really cheap now. So if you can get convertibility at anywhere near the current market, you've got some real upside potential. So I owned West Red Lake, and there was another one uh, in South America called Aris, ARIS. That's worked out really well. It's been paying 6 or 7%. And once again, you've got a conversion possibility if the market ever takes off. So, but they're few and far between.
Okay. Next question. It says, hi, Doug. In a recent podcast with David Lynn, you mentioned that by far the US or DC is currently the most dangerous country worldwide. Considering the influence of powerful lobbying groups like APAC, why do you believe that it is not Israel through its influence on American policy that poses this danger? And I think this is kind of accentuated by the recent appearance of Netanyahu in front of the joint session of Congress, which they interrupted his speech 50 times, if I recall, for ovations.
Mm.
Everyone was enthusiastic about his visit.
Uh, Years ago, I was actually a supporter of Bibi because he did a lot to free marketize the Israeli economy. And I said, oh, kind of a free market oriented guy, relative terms anyway. So I was all for Bibi, but I didn't know other aspects of his personality. And the fact of the matter is that am I uh, am I friendly towards Israel? Well, this is a long story. Does Israel have a right to exist? And does the land belong to the Jews or the Palestinians? We don't need to get into all that now. All I can say about it really is that, which I've said before, it's that I don't really care. This is in the Middle East where these people have been fighting each other tooth and claw for at least 3,000 years. And there's no reason why the US should get involved in it. And I think it's shameful that a lot of US congressmen and high government officials are dual citizens of Israel and the US. I'm all for being a dual citizen of as many countries as you'd like. But if you're going to be a high government official or a legislator, I don't think you should be a citizen of two countries because your loyalties are definitely divided at that point.
Yeah.
So that's the way I feel about it. I
Yeah. And I
mean,
think I just don't like they can do what they want, but it seems like what they want is to they want us to go to war. I mean, Iraq, I mean, it's
yeah, that's
Libya
what
was a
Netanyahu was
target.
saying. Give us money, give us weapons, blah, blah, blah. We're your friends. But they're really using the US as a milk cow, and it's shameful. So Thomas Jefferson was right. We should be a friend to all, but an ally of none. Wish Israel well. Wish the Palestinians well. Or a pox on both their houses, too, if you want. I don't really care. It's none of our business to stick our nose in.
Did you? It was about to say for me, it was this the his appearance in front of the Congress and the clapping like seals.
Uh,
It's just disturbing. It's
they
unseemly.
who else do they do that for than that evil little dwarf Zelensky?
That's right. That's right. He's the other one. Yep. It's amazing. It's shocking. So, all right. Next question. He asks about, he says in 2007, Bernard von NotHaus was arrested for minting and selling silver coins. Did you know Bernard? And are you familiar with his case?
I remember it vaguely, and I did meet him way back when. Haven't been in touch with him in any way for a long time at this point. Um, like most of the things that the US government does, it's shameful. I mean, what was he doing? He was minting basically silver rounds that were called Liberty Dollar or whatever. And I mean, this was just shameful what they did to the poor guy. Put him in jail and confiscated a whole bunch of precious metals. But they do this to all kinds of people. I mean, I knew uh, Douglas Jackson, who was an MD who lived in around Richmond, who had something called e-gold, which was a
Mhm.
way
They went after them pretty hard.
very much. And of course, what did they do to Peter Schiff's father, Erwin Schiff, who was got involved in something similar, except it was tax related. So you're painting a target on your back if you do the type of thing these guys got in trouble for. I mean, it's admirable that they did that in a way, but do you really want to be a lamb led to slaughter by these people? They'll bankrupt you, they'll make your life miserable, they'll put you in jail.
Yeah, so I was looking up specific charges that he had, and so he was charged with conspiracy against the United States,
Mm,
because they said he conspired to defraud the U.S. by creating and distributing his own currency.
an
Number
obvious
one.
lie. Yeah,
Number two, counterfeiting. He was charged with creating and distributing coins similar to U.S. currency, which could be used as money in transactions, thus undermining the official currency of the U.S.
obvious sham and lie, especially since he was basically turning out 1 ounce silver rounds, and the US doesn't make silver dollars anymore, or even things that masquerade as silver dollars.
Right, and then and then fraud, because they said that he was misleading people into thinking that Liberty Dollar was a legitimate alternative to U.S. currency.
Well, actually has some market value as opposed to US currency, which has no, I know you're dealing with evil people, I think.
Yeah, and you look at he was arrested in 2007. He wasn't. If finally he was convicted in 2014. So 7 years of his life goes by like that, just fighting this off. And then he was sentenced only. He could have received up to 22 years in prison for this. However, his sentence was reduced to 6 months of house arrest and 3 years probation. And the reason they give for it is the lenient sentence was influenced by the judge's not acknowledgement that he had not intended to deceive or harm anyone, but rather had sought to make a philosophical point about the monetary system. So if that's what the judge thought, how can you convict them of these things?
If the judge thought that, he should have thrown the case out. That's what the judge should have done. But on the bright side, at least it wasn't a judge that was put in office by Soros and his crew, because then they would have really thrown the book at him.
Yeah, they also seized at the market value of his assets. They seized at the time was $7 million at the time, 16,000 pounds of Liberty Dollar coins, precious metals, and there's some gold in there too, I guess, that they took from him. So
It's
how dare you suggest that anything is that any there should be an alternative to the dollar?
no, of course not.
Okay, so let's see. What are your views on Keiretsu structure, whereby multiple businesses aligned with each other invest in their own shares of each other's businesses? I guess this is a common approach in Japan, where the different businesses, usually centered around a bank, I guess, are all like shareholders of each other. It kind of creates a
Yeah,
cartel.
these giant Japanese companies are like octopuses, and they have divisions that do everything. And if they become publicly traded, then they own each other's shares. In South Africa, the mining finance houses used to do that type of thing too, where Anglo American used to own shares of General Mining, and General Mining used to own shares. It was all it makes a kind of a happy club for the management, where if most of your shares are owned by overtly friendly parties, and I guess the Koreans do this. They have something called chai balls, which is not dissimilar, I think, where they all have interlocking share structures, and it's a great way to cement management and power. So it's a scam, basically, and I think it's a bad idea.
Okay. All right. So this guy posted this a week ago, this question. So it's a little bit outdated now, but he says it's alleged that the police and Secret Service were notified that there was a potential assassin with a rifle on one of the rooftops. There's no shortage of similarly questionable details associated with this fiasco. highlighted by the defiant fist pump in front of the podium for the cameras. What are your thoughts on this event? Now we're a couple weeks away. What do you think about it? And what would Charles Knight have to say about any of this?
Well, Charles Knight would, I think, contemplate if you want to kill a political person, why do you want to do it? Now, is it to get rid of that person or is it to make a statement? And if it's just to get rid of that person, I think there are much safer and more certain and effective ways to do it than pick a public place which should be heavily guarded and watched. So the question is, why do you want to do it? Do you want to make a statement? Of course, most terrorism is about making a statement as opposed to just perhaps getting rid of that one warm body. So I think Charles would and does contemplate all that. I suggest anybody listening go on Amazon and get a copy of Assassin, which I think is a very entertaining read, which covers a lot of this stuff in some detail. But the best single thing that I've read analyzing the technical aspects of what we think happened or what we think we know happened, because we don't really know what. All we know is what they've told us. We don't know anything. We don't know the model of the gun. We don't even know if the gun actually had a scope on it. We don't know what kind of ammunition he was using. We don't know anything. Just some miscellaneous anecdotes coming from various places, and you can't really believe anything that's coming from the Secret Service or the FBI. But there's a guy I'm friendly with named Steve Bryant, and we could link to his blog. I don't have it here in front of me, but I'll give it to you, and maybe you can put it someplace. Anyway, Bryant wrote, he's a weapons expert. That's what he does for a living, is deal. And I mean, he's a genuine weapons expert and has a background in spookdom, so forth. But philosophically, he's on the right side of things from my point of view. And he wrote, I don't know, 5,000 words
Hmm.
on his analysis of all this stuff. And it's pretty good, actually. Value free. He's not beating any particular drum, but I think it's worth reading. And he's got a free blog too.
Would you
That
know what that's called?
uh, God,
It's okay. Just send it to me. I'll include it in the description of the
yeah,
video.
I can't remember the name of his blog, but it's on Substack. I know
Okay.
that.
All right. I'll look for it. Okay. What was the summary of what he said? I mean, just the high level.
Oh, basically, it's that there's no way. It was so incompetent and so stupid and so poorly done. The whole thing from start. His bottom line is that there's really no way that the Secret Service or other agencies could not have been involved in this thing.
Yeah, I think that seems pretty obvious. It's hard to know at what level and in what way, but there's
Yeah,
just so many problems with the entire thing.
so many problems.
But also on the other side, where you've got, we were talking about this Michael Yon interview you listened to, where he's saying, how odd is it that the photographer who captures the bullet passing through the air happened to be using a shutter speed fast enough to do so, which you'd never use under normal
Never
circumstances?
used. And just happened to be there at that moment with that shutter speed. I mean, it's like, what are the odds?
What are the odds? Yeah. And that they would leave it with an image that looks like Iwo Jima with Trump. Like that they would photograph that moment that literally looks like the Marines raising the flag in Iwo Jima.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I don't know what to make of any of it, quite
No.
frankly. It's almost like we're living in the matrix where it's being made up as we go along, and none of it's is it all real or is it real or is it Memorex like the ad used to be? I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, it is like it does seem like it's crafted for these, like if you were telling a story, this is what you want to capture those specific iconic images. The one where he's on the ground and he's got the sun coming through and his hands are like this, and he's like, and this is covered by the Secret Service guys. These iconic photos that came out of it are just
Yeah, and then we get back to the motives behind this. Was it a lone nut? I'd say that after the bullshit investigation is conducted, chances are about 999 out of 1,000 that that's the conclusion they're going to come to because they have to. But if I was Trump, I would I'd get some private security, frankly, and be careful because these people don't want him in office. They don't want him to. They don't want to lose control of the apparatus of the state. They don't want to. And Trump is a loose cannon, and they're very happy where they are. They don't need a loose cannon bouncing around. So his life is in danger, I think. And as a matter of fact, for all I know, Kamala's life is in danger too, because she's such a substandard candidate. I mean, she just wound up there almost by accident, and they'd really like her to go away so she can be replaced with Hillary because it's Hillary's turn, or Big Mike because she was she's hooked up with Obama, or who knows? I mean, all these people, or because they just want to create chaos. And these Jacobins really are looking for a chaotic time where they can do all kinds of things that they think need doing, just like the Jacobins did in France in 1793. Same thing, same people.
what do you think of what do you think of the narrative that's emerged about Iran and their interest in assassinating Trump? And then at the same time, the drumbeat for war against Iran, because Netanyahu here, has grown. And Trump's posted on True Social. He said, if I'm assassinated, if Iran assassinates me, I hope you, I don't know exactly what he said, but destroy Iran.
Yeah, well, that's more craziness. I'd say the chances of the Iranians being involved in this, do they really need all the trouble that they'd get? I don't think they do. And I think they know that. So I'd say the chances of their being behind this are slim and none, and Slim's out of town. So I wouldn't worry about the Iranians. But of course, the US having, who knows, 800 bases around the world and so forth, they're antagonizing all kinds of people. And who knows what those people that are being antagonized, that their friends and relatives are being droned or bombed or assassinated or God knows what, individually or severally, they may want to get back. So we're kind of asking for trouble. And no, I wouldn't blame it on the Iranians.
No, but that's who they would definitely want us to blame it on. And I think if they were trying to take out, if it was like the deep state, they were trying to take out Trump, and then you find out, turns out the state of Iran was after actually was trying to get him. And then this guy had the crooks had some connection to them. And then right the next week, Netanyahu's coming in and talks about Iran. It's like, it does feel like, I mean, there's a plausible scenario that uh, the case is, there's been an effort to create that case for war with Iran
No
this
doubt.
fall.
The Israelis would like Iran to go away, and they can't do it effectively. But hey, our big brother can. So why don't you and him fight?
Exactly. You did so well last time. Keep it up. Come on, get in
Yeah.
there.
It's so transparent and so insane at the same time.
And yet, despite the level of transparency, people don't seem to really,
No.
they still fall prey to this. Let's Kamala, go Kamala, or worship Trump. Like they still fall, like the real game is trying to get our military to destroy another country. It's like
Yeah.
that seems to be the big game.
Yeah, which is really kind of stupid because the Houthis, uh, they don't even control the country of Yemen. They're a rebel group within Yemen that are fighting a civil war at the same time as this is going on, and we can't even take them out.
Nope. And when we destroyed this big, whatever it was, oil facility or port facility that they had, I think it was Israel, and I think the U.S. may have been involved with that too, after a drone attack in Tel Aviv that the Houthis managed from all the way where they are to get a drone into Tel Aviv. They were dancing in the streets about it. So these people have nothing. They have nothing to lose. Like they don't
No.
even, they're like, oh yeah, okay, punish us. That's fine. We keep hitting back. The honey
Yeah.
badgers, as you.
Punish us, and we promise we're going to punish you back. So where's this end?
Yeah, exactly. Not good. Okay. Doug, what's your history in Thailand? Did you ever live there for an extended period?
Yeah, for about 3 months, and been there many times, and pretty much all over Thailand. Pretty much, I really like it. It's an unusual country in all the world. It really is. It has an awful lot to recommend it, and that would be my favorite place to light if I wanted to live in, frankly, in Asia, I think.
Yeah. Which part do you like the most? Is Chiang
I
Mai
like,
or
well, no, I like I like those islands in the south. In other words, like
like Phuket?
Phuket,
Yeah.
yeah, or Koh Samui, the beach islands. I really prefer them. Now, you can't go too far south because if you go too far south, you get into Muslim country where the culture changes quite radically. It's no longer Thai culture, it's Muslim culture. It's the same thing in the Philippines. Go to the north of the Philippines, it's got that veneer of the Spanish having been there for hundreds of years and Christianity. But you go to the southern islands like Mindanao, and now you're talking about the Huck rebels and the Muslims, and they don't, even to this day, you can feel it when you go there. They really don't like uh, barangs walking around on their territory. I mean, after when we took over the Philippines back in the McKinley Roosevelt days, nobody knows, but we probably killed 200,000. That's one guess, but nobody knows. 200,000 Filipinos as they were trying to become independent. Now we've gotten rid of Spain. Oh, the Americans will let us be independent. No, it's not what happened. So the Americans killed a couple hundred thousand. And that was mostly in the South with the,
Mm.
so same thing in Thailand. Just don't go to unfriendly parts of the country.
Yeah. Especially so much of Thailand is so friendly. People are very nice there. I mean,
Yeah,
it's no
exactly.
no need to go to those other parts.
No, you really don't need to.
Okay, just a couple other questions, Doug. I know we're getting a little long here. How would the election results affect your investment decisions? Are there any specific policies that are being pushed you or that are pushing you in a certain direction, or do you expect specific changes from one candidate or another?
Well, we all know what Trump says he's going to do, and maybe he'll do it. Reduce some taxes in some ways on corporations or maybe on individuals. So that's very good. Maybe he'll try to deregulate more. That's very good. I'm all for it. But maybe he won't, or he won't be able to. And one thing we know pretty much for sure is he's going to try to put in serious import duties
Yeah.
and punish with God knows how, there's a number of ways, countries that he doesn't like what their government's doing. So it could be a very mixed bag. If Trump, and of course, if Kamala or any Democrats elected, it's going to be bad all the way around. I mean, everything they do is going to be stupid and destructive. No exceptions that I can think of. But where do you go? Where do you put your assets at this point? How can you hide from these people?
Yeah. Would you invest differently at this point, anticipating one, or like after if Kamala is elected, would you change how you have your capital allocated? Do politics matter that much?
Well, I'd want to make sure that I have as much as possible outside, physically outside of the US, in a country that isn't trying to rule the world, frankly. Some quiet, relatively backward country where that's not what the government does, is make an active effort to steal money to that degree. So that's one thing that I would do. And I am still of the opinion that the cheapest area of the market, happily for me, because it's what I've always been most interested in and done most in at this moment, is the resource area. Oil, natural gas, uranium, gold, and other metals across the board, mining. Uh, Coal, that's another one, of course, I should have mentioned that, where a lot of these companies that have earnings are selling for 3 or 4 or 5 times earnings, and some of them fat dividends. And I think that's where I'd go. So I wouldn't change much within those parameters.
Yeah. Okay. Last question. Do you have any book recommendations or authors who covered the best performing investments or investment strategies during the Great Depression?
No, I know Murray Rothbard, who's an excellent writer and kind of a universal man when it comes to history and economics, wrote a book called America's Great Depression. But I don't recall if he says much about investments as opposed to economics in that fat book. I don't think he does, frankly. So the
Well,
answer is, I don't know.
what would you want? I mean, I just there's one I have, and then I just looked up some that I'll mention them in a second. But are there what assets would one want to own during that time period? Do you think?
During the Depression, what would you want to own? I guess Richard Russell said it best, is during the Depression, everybody loses. The winner is just the person that loses the least. So how do you put yourself in that position? And situation is different now than it was during the last depression because gold isn't $20, soon to be raised to $35, an arbitrary number, and go up from there. But on the other hand, the government's printing money by the bushel basket. I guess you have to own a lot of gold. And I'd own a lot of silver too, because silver really is kind of cheap. Yes, even though it's about $30 an ounce at this point. Historically, that's still pretty cheap. And it's more volatile than gold. And it's like a religious token. So I definitely own a lot of silver, although you have to own a lot to be of any value because it's, well, frankly, it's so cheap.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I remember is a book I read recently. It's called Only Yesterday, An Informal History of the 1920s by Frederick Lewis Allen. Um, Big thing in that one, just you needed to you needed liquidity. So if you had cash, then you did okay because you could buy real estate for really cheap. You could buy other assets for really cheap. So you ended up doing okay. And it was the people who didn't have any liquidity, I guess, is what he said was the worst. There's another book that had great reviews. It's called The Great Crash 1929 by Kenneth Galbraith. So that one was also highly recommended, but from what I understand, it says much the same. You want to be liquid.
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing that occurs to me too. It's that I don't want to have any margin in any accounts. And I'd like to have cash. Not that we know the cash is being inflated out of existence at 5 or 10%. Pick a number per year at the moment. And that number is probably going to go up, and maybe the brokerage firm is going to fail. And there's all kinds of problems with having the cash. But on the other hand, maybe it's better to be assured of losing 5 or 10% per year than owning some overpriced tech stock, which you could easily lose 90%.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. It makes sense. Okay. Well, I think that's it for today, Doug. We'll wrap it up there and we'll be back next week. I'm sure at the pace things are going, there'll be some exciting news for us to discuss by then.
Almost certainly, unfortunately.
All right. Well, you have a good weekend. We'll talk to you then.
Thanks, Matt. You too.